We rehearsed our goodbye like a play. Same lines, same pauses. Until one day, it wasn't rehearsal anymore. My name is Evan. I live in Seattle now, though I grew up in places I can't name without clenching my jaw. It's November, and the sky hangs low like it's been pulled down by grief. My father, Charles Langley, is dying. He has ALS. Lou Gehrig's. A real bastard of a disease that steals you, one syllable at a time. First it took his grip. Then his gait. Now his voice, a slow, tightening noose. I moved into his condo 6 months ago, a sterile modern place with wide doorways and beeping machines. My lease in LA was up anyway. Not like I was getting callbacks. We've fallen into a rhythm, my father and I. Mornings are for meds and sponge baths. Afternoons for silence and feeding tubes. Evenings? That's when the ghosts come out. We rehearse scenes. Shakespeare, mostly. He mouths the words I fill and where his voice can't. Hamlet. King Lear. Oedipus Rex. Always the father and son. Always a crown between them. Tonight it's Lear. Me. Does any here know me? This is not Lear. Dad mouthed, who is it that can tell me who I am? His fingers twitch. That's how I know he's proud. I never told anyone this, but I used to write scenes when I was 16. Whole one-act plays. Mostly arguments. My father found one once, an imagined confrontation between us, set in some fictional purgatory. He called it melodramatic. I called it therapy. Now, he wants to perform it. He asked with his eyes. I knew what he meant. There's a drawer by his bed filled with old notebooks, and the blue spiral one has "Exit Interview" scrawled in sharp. It's not good writing. It's raw. A teenage boy's howl into the void aimed at the man who taught him that love must be earned. But I said yes. Not tonight. But soon. The thing about dying is that it shrinks time. Mornings are quick, sterile tasks. G-tube formula. Medication crushed in applesauce. Checking for bed sores. Somewhere in there, I whisper a good morning. Dad can't speak anymore, not clearly. His tongue slurs against air. But his eyes are sharp. He blinks twice for yes, once for no. Sometimes he stares, and I don't know what he's trying to say. That's the worst part. We used to argue just fine. Now I can't even decipher his disappointment. The hospice nurse, Valerie, is kind. She calls him Professor Langley, which makes him beam. He taught philosophy at the University of Washington for 38 years. Nietzsche, Wittgenstein, Camus? When I told him I was going to act, he said, pretending to be other people? Isn't that what liars do? That was 10 years ago. We didn't speak for 2. But now, we act together every night. Funny how the body betrays you, but memory doesn't. He remembers whole soliloquies, blinking in time to the rhythm. I speak them aloud, pacing the room like a stage. Sometimes, when I hit a line just right, he cries. Quietly. I pretend not to notice. Tonight, before Lear, I ask him something I never have. Were you scared when you found out? He blinks once. Are you scared now? 2 blinks. I nod. Then the scene begins. Me. You see me here, you gods, a poor old man. Him, mouthed, as full of grief as age, wretched in both. We go on like that for an hour. When I kiss his forehead afterward, I think I feel heat. Or maybe memory. Or maybe that's the same thing now. The next morning, Valerie tells me to think about final arrangements. His breathing's changed, she says. More shallow. More pauses. It's normal. Nothing about this feels normal. I sit by his bed, watching the machines count his seconds. He watches me back. Do you still want to do the play? I ask. He blinks twice. Tonight? Another 2. I pull out the old notebook. Exit Interview. It's juvenile. Angry. The stage directions are ridiculous. Like, Father looms like a storm cloud. And, Son clutches rage like a dying bird. But there's truth in it. Real, ugly truth. He wanted to do this. So tonight I'll let 16-year-old Evan yell. And I'll let 70-year-old Charles answer. No crowns. No poison. Just words. Our final scene. Curtains at 8. I turned the living room into a stage. Cleared out the coffee table, wheeled his hospital bed into position. Dimmed the lights. I even lit a candle, which felt absurd and poetic at once, like a makeshift footlight in a dying man's theater. The script lay on my lap. The scene, a final argument in the afterlife. My teenage fantasy of Judgment Day. Son and father, toe to toe, finally saying what neither could say while life still pulsed loud enough to drown the silence. I pulled a chair next to his bed. He watched me, his lips parting just slightly, like breath was trying to shape meaning. I held the script up. You ready? 2 blinks. Yes. I started. Son, you never knew me. You knew who you wanted me to be. And when I wasn't that, you folded me up like bad philosophy. His eyes didn't leave mine. I could swear he was mouthing the lines. Not his, mine. Like he remembered them too. Father, I knew you. I just couldn't accept that knowing you meant watching you walk away from everything I understood. His hand twitched. That meant he was trying to speak. I waited. He mouthed something. I leaned in close. I thought I was protecting you. That wasn't in the script. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The line hung there, heavier than any stage direction. I flipped to the next page. Son, you said actors lie? You said pretending was cowardice. But you pretended every day I was someone you could fix. Who was the coward? I looked at him. He blinked once. Not for yes. Just once. Father, I loved you the way I knew how. That love came with conditions. That was my failure, not yours. I was shaking now. The script trembled in my hands. I was still 16 in that scene, still furious. Still broken. But here in this room, in this November dark, I was something else. Not healed. Just cracked open. I closed the notebook. Do you want to keep going? I asked. No blinks. Just eyes wet and wide. I nodded. Took his hand. It felt small, brittle. Like a memory fading. I forgive you, I said. He tried to mouth something. I leaned in again. I love you. The 3 words were crushed by muscle loss. Just air and shape. But I saw them. I heard them anyway. He blinked once. I kissed his temple. The candle flickered like it knew something I didn't. That night, I slept in the chair next to him. I woke up every hour to check if he was still breathing. Sometimes I couldn't tell, and my heart would sprint until I saw his chest rise. At 4:17 a.m., I dreamed we were on a stage. No props. Just 2 chairs. He stood. Fully upright. No tube, no chair. And he spoke. You always had the words. I just never knew how to listen. I woke up crying. In the morning, Valerie checked his vitals. Still stable, she said. But his eyes didn't track me the same way. They were cloudier. Distant. I sat with him for hours. No scripts. No soliloquies. Just silence. I thought about what I'd say if this were the real goodbye. Not the rehearsed one. The messy, unrehearsed kind. You taught me how to think, I said. And how to doubt. And how to hate myself when I couldn't measure up. His eyes moved. Slightly. But you also taught me how to fight. And how to look at truth, even when it hurt. I swallowed. My throat burned. And maybe that's what acting is. Maybe it's not pretending. Maybe it's telling the truth with someone else's words. I don't know if he heard that. But I hope he did. Because it was the last thing I said that day. Curtin stayed down. He slept most of the next day. Or maybe he was somewhere in between. I stayed beside him, reading from old plays and nursing lukewarm coffee. Hamlet again. I figured if we had to keep dancing with death, we might as well do it with the Prince of Denmark. Valerie came in around noon. She adjusted the four, checked the morphine pump. "He's in what we call the letting go phase," she said. "It's like the tide pulling back. There's still water, but the shoreline changes." She left me with that. I sat there thinking about shorelines, and how far back the tide had already gone. I pulled out my phone and found a voicemail I hadn't listened to in years. He left it during my first big role, off-Broadway, back when I still believed that kind of thing fixed everything. He didn't know I kept it. "I saw the reviews." Well, some of them. "You were good, Evan." "I don't say that enough." "I hope you're all right. Call if you want. Or don't. Just, yeah? Take care." It was clumsy. Hesitant. But it was him trying. And I didn't call him back. I wanted to tell him I heard it. That I kept it like a relic. That I pressed play when I doubted myself most. But his eyes were closed now. I whispered, "You were good, too." That night I sat in the dark beside his bed, reading the last pages of King Lear. "Me. Pray you undo this button." "Thank you, sir." I let the silence answer. "Me. Do you see this? Look on her, look, her lips, look there, look there." It was the moment before Lear dies. Holding Cordelia. Believing for a breath that she still lives. My voice cracked. I looked at him. Still breathing. Barely. But no signs. No movement. I reached for his hand. Held it. I didn't need to perform anymore. "Dad," I said, "we don't have to rehearse this part. We can just be in it." There was a tremble in his fingers. Maybe reflex. Maybe response. "Remember when you used to say life was a tragedy for those who feel, and a comedy for those who think?" I laughed, soft and bitter. "Well, I feel everything now. And none of it's funny." I laid my head beside his hand. Just rested there. Somewhere between midnight and morning, the machines began to sound different. Not urgent. Not loud. Just final. Valerie came. Checked. Nodded. I didn't cry right away. I sat there for a long time, reading the last few lines again. Softly. "Me. He's gone, indeed." Silence. Curtain down. The funeral was small. His colleagues, a few neighbors, 2 distant cousins who looked more confused than grieving. I read a passage from Plato. Something he used to assign in his intro to ethics class. I tried to sound professorial for him. Tried to make it feel like a lecture hall. "Death is not the worst that can happen to men." I wondered if I believed it. When I got home, I found the notebook again. Exit interview. Tucked beneath it, folded once, was a sheet I hadn't seen before. My name was at the top. It was a scene. One he'd written. His handwriting. Clean and deliberate. Titled Coda. The setting was a stage. Father and son. 2 chairs. No more arguments. Just a quiet conversation. His first line? "Father, do you believe in curtain calls?" I closed my eyes. And whispered, "Yes." I didn't open the rest of the pages in Coda for 3 days. They sat on my desk like something sacred, or radioactive. I wasn't sure which. I'd read that one line so many times it had started to echo. "Father, do you believe in curtain calls?" Was it a challenge? An apology? A joke? On the 4th day, I poured a glass of scotch, the good kind he used to drink on his grating nights, and finally read the rest. The scene wasn't long. 5 pages. Sparse dialogue. But everything was there. Everything he couldn't say in real life, or maybe didn't know how. Regret. Admiration. Love. There was even a note at the bottom: "If you ever perform this, don't overact it. Just tell the truth." I laughed. Then cried. Then drank the rest of the glass. I started writing again. Not just roles or monologues, but memories. Small scenes from our final months. I wrote about the feeding tubes, the way he blinked once when I tried to sing, the way his eyes lit up when I butchered Macbeth. I wrote about Valerie's quiet presence, and the way Dad mouthed the word, son, with his last bit of strength. It wasn't for a play. It wasn't for anyone. I just needed to put it somewhere outside my body. One night, I found myself at a local black box theater. An open mic night. Mostly bad poetry and acoustic covers of sad songs. I wasn't there to perform. I just needed air that smelled like dust and velvet again. But then the host called for last acts. And I stood up. I had coda in my coat pocket. I don't remember walking to the stage. I just remember the lights. The hush. The way paper shook in my hands. I read his lines. Father, do you believe in curtain calls? Son, only if there's someone left to clap. Father, there is. Even if you can't hear it. I read the whole scene. My voice wavered, but I didn't stop. When I finished, there was no applause. Just silence. The kind that follows something real. And then, one person clapped. Softly. Then two. Then the whole room. Not loud. But enough. I stepped off the stage feeling like I had given something back. Maybe not to him. But maybe to me. Weeks passed. I went back to LA, found a short-term apartment, took a bartending job at night. I kept acting, but it felt different now. Less like escape. More like remembering. I auditioned for a role in a new play, a father-son story, set in a hospital room. The director asked me why it mattered to me. I said, because I know what it's like to rehearse a goodbye and never get a final draft. He gave me the part. Opening night is in a month. I've taped coda to the inside of my dressing room mirror. Just the title page. Just to remind me. Every time I say my lines, I hear him in the wings. Not correcting. Just listening. And maybe, just maybe, clapping. Opening night came like a wave. Relentless. Loud. Impossible to stop. I stood in the wings, my palms slick with sweat, my stomach a pit of ghosts. The theater was modest, 75 seats, black walls, a single overhead spotlight, but it might as well have been the globe. I wore scrubs for the first scene. Hospital room. Low bed. My father was played by an older actor named Russell. Kind man. Quiet eyes. Nothing like my dad, but tonight he'd have to do. The play opened with silence. Just me, sitting by the bed. Reading lines from Hamlet. Art imitating life. Or maybe just life refusing to die quietly. I said the first line. He was a man. Take him for all in all. I shall not look upon his like again. And something in me cracked. The rest of the performance was a blur. Muscle memory. Breath and space. But something else happened, too, something I hadn't prepared for. I started talking to him. Not Russell. Not the audience. My father. Every line bent toward him like a compass finding true north. In the final scene, when the character dies, I knelt beside the bed. The lights dimmed. I whispered the same words I had said on his last night. We don't have to rehearse this part. We can just be in it. And I swear, just for a second, I heard breathing that didn't belong to the script. After the show, people came up to shake my hand. Say nice things. Offer shallow praise wrapped in deep sympathy. I smiled. Nodded. Let it wash over me. Then a woman approached. 60s, maybe. Hair pulled into a gray bun. She had a program clutched to her chest like it was an artifact. She said, that wasn't acting. That was a confession. I didn't know what to say. She smiled, soft and sad. I lost my son. It felt like he was in the room with me tonight. So, thank you? I almost broke down right there. But I just said, thank you for hearing him. A week later, I got an email. Small theater company. Said they'd heard about my performance. Asked if I'd be willing to develop a one-man show. Something autobiographical. They used the word intimate. I said yes. I didn't even hesitate. I started outlining scenes that night. Not fiction. Not even dramatization. Just memory. The smell of antiseptic and old books. The way my father's eyes flicked to mine when he wanted to say something but couldn't. The notebook. The candle. The line, "Do you believe in curtain calls?" It's called Exit Interview. Same title. Same spine. But this time, the ending is different. In the final scene, I step off stage. Into the light. No curtain. No blackout. Just me, looking out into the dark and saying, I do. I believe in curtain calls. Even when the audience is gone. Even when the stage is empty. Because someone, somewhere, always hears the truth. And claps anyway. When I performed it for the first time, I left one seat in the front row empty. And on it, I placed a notebook. Open to coda. No one asked about it. But I think they understood. Some goodbyes are permanent. But some you get to say twice. Once for the world. And once for the person who taught you how to speak at all. The show ran for 6 nights. Each one quieter than the last, but not emptier. Like the audience had learned to listen differently. I began to recognize faces. People returning. Sitting in the same seats. Some brought notebooks. Some wiped their eyes before I even spoke the first line. One man left a folded letter on the empty seat where the notebook sat. I didn't open it. I just kept it. Something was happening that I hadn't planned for. The show was healing people. Or maybe helping them grieve. Maybe those are the same thing. One night, after the final bow, a teenager waited by the back door. He couldn't have been older than 17. Hair dyed blue. Hood up. He said, "My dad hasn't talked to me in a year. We fought when I came out." I waited. He pulled something from his hoodie. A copy of the program, folded and creased. "I'm gonna send this to him." I nodded. Good. Then he asked, "Do you think he'll ever come around?" I wanted to say yes. Wanted to offer him a guarantee. Instead, I said, "I think sometimes we rehearse goodbyes because we're still hoping for a better one." He nodded like he understood. Then he left. After the last performance, I packed the notebook up in a small wooden box. I didn't lock it. Just tied it with twine. Inside, I placed the letter the man had left, along with a playbill signed by every cast and crew member. Then I drove to my father's grave. He was buried in a modest cemetery outside Seattle. No view. No grand trees. Just rows of quiet stones. I sat down beside him and placed the box on the grass. "I don't know what curtain call you got," I said. "If there's a stage where you are, or just silence. But if there is, I hope you heard the clapping." The wind picked up. Brisk. Cold. November air again. I said everything. I whispered. All the lines. Even the ones you wrote. I stayed there for a long time. Before I left, I stood and looked at the stone. Charles Langley. Philosopher. Father. Failed and forgiven. The last part one had added. My decision. He wouldn't have liked it. But I think by the end, he might have accepted it. That winter, I started teaching workshops. Storytelling for grief. Performance as eulogy. They filled faster than I expected. People brought ashes. Scarves. Pocket watches. Wedding rings. They didn't speak at first. Just listened. Then they began to write. One woman wrote a monologue to her mother's urn. A man performed a scene between him and the brother he never got to forgive. I didn't direct. I just held space. Made sure the lights worked. Made sure the words had somewhere to land. And every time someone asked, "Does this sound too personal?" I said the same thing. If it's true, it's enough. Because it always was. Always. Spring came late to Seattle. Rain lingered like it forgot how to leave. I kept teaching. Performing when I could. But something had shifted. The grief was no longer sharp. It was quieter, like a song you hum but can't name. I found myself walking more. Through Volunteer Park. Down Broadway. Once I passed the university where my father taught. I stood outside his old lecture hall and tried to picture him there. Gesturing wildly, chalk smudged on his sleeve, voice raised in debate about Descartes or Kierkegaard. I stepped inside. The room was empty. Dust hung in the light like stage fog. I sat in the back row. No one came. But I stayed anyway. Maybe I hoped for a ghost. Maybe I just needed to sit in the echo. I whispered his name. Charles. And for a second, I could almost hear him respond. That night I had a dream. We were on a stage again. Black floor. Black walls. The only light came from above. He stood across from me. No wheelchair. No four. Just the man he used to be. The one I remembered and resented and loved. He said, "Tell me a story." And I said, "Which one?" He smiled. "The one where we got it right." I started to speak, but the words stuck. And he said gently, "Start with the silence." I woke up crying. But the tears didn't hurt. That week, I was invited to give a talk. A university panel on art and mortality. I almost said no. But I knew he would have wanted me to go. Not for pride. For legacy. I stood behind the podium, looking out at rows of young faces. And I said, "My father believed in asking the hardest questions. I became an actor because I was terrified of them. But then he got sick. And in his dying, he gave me the answer he never could in life." Silence. I let it breathe. The answer was this: the final act isn't about resolution. It's about recognition. Seeing someone for who they really are. And letting them see you. Afterward, a student asked what play I would do if I had only one left in me. I smiled. A new one. Always a new one. Because I knew now that telling the truth didn't mean staying in the past. It meant using it. Every scar. Every silence. Every goodbye. Especially the ones we rehearsed until they became real. That night, I walked the long way home. Past the places we used to fight. Past the corner where he told me I was wasting my life. Past the cafe where I once waited 3 hours for him, and he never showed. But this time, I didn't stop to stare. I just kept walking. The curtain had fallen. But I was still here. Still speaking. Still standing. And somewhere, maybe, he was listening. Applauding. Softly. Always. I flew back to LA in early summer. The city hadn't changed, but I had. I walked differently. Talked softer. Listened more. Maybe grief doesn't just hollow you out. Maybe it makes room. I kept the workshops going, this time in a rented room above a bookstore in Echo Park. People came from across the city, artists, caretakers, estranged sons, dying mothers. Everyone wanted to say something that no one had ever let them say. I never advertised. Word just spread. Like whispers in a quiet theater. One night, a man in his 70s performed a scene with an empty chair. He played both roles, himself and his father. The scene ended with him placing a pair of invisible shoes on the chair and saying, "These never fit me, but I kept them anyway." He left in tears. So did half the room. We never clapped in those sessions. Clapping felt too final. Instead, we nodded. We breathed together. Sometimes we hugged. Sometimes we didn't have to. I started getting letters. Emails, mostly. One from a woman in Vermont who said her father had passed the night she listened to a bootleg recording of Exit interview. She wrote, "Your story gave me a script to feel what I couldn't say." Another was from a teenager in New Zealand. He and his dad had watched the same YouTube clip in silence. At the end, his father turned and said, "I don't want our curtain to close like that." They started therapy the next week. I printed every message. Kept them in a folder labeled Encore. Because they were. They were proof that the story kept breathing. In August, I was asked to adapt Exit interview into a radio play. At first, I hesitated. My voice alone? No stage, no lighting, no eyes to hold? But then I remembered those nights with my father. Just us. Words in the dark. No audience. No curtain. I said yes. Recording it felt like an exhale I'd been holding for years. I read the lines slower this time. Let them live in the pauses. I imagined him on the other side of the glass. Nodding. Breathing. Blinking once. The producer cried when it ended. So did I. I walked out into the night air, LA glowing like a stage after the actors have left. I whispered the line I'd first spoken to him, the night we did Lear. You see me here, you gods, a poor old man. Only this time, I added. But not alone. Never alone again. Because somewhere, in a hospice room, or a black box theater, or a boy's bedroom, or a stranger's car at a red light while listening to a story that feels like their own. Somewhere, someone is still rehearsing goodbye. And this time, they might get it right. A year passed. I didn't mark the anniversary the way I thought I would. No candle. No grave visit. No performance. Just a quiet morning and a stronger cup of coffee than usual. Grief doesn't schedule itself. It comes in odd shapes now. A book spine with his name. A student quoting Camus. A moment on stage where I forget the next line and instinctively wait for him to feed it. He never does, of course. But in that silence, I hear him anyway. I kept the workshops going. Eventually, they became something else, the Final Act Project. A non-profit. We offer free writing sessions in hospices now. Trained actors perform bedside scenes for patients who want one last story told. Some are funny. Some aren't. But every single one is true. One afternoon, I sat beside a man named Raoul. Late 60s. Lung cancer. He asked me to write a short play about the first time he told a lie. I asked why that moment. He said, because it's where I disappeared. And I want to return to it before I go. We wrote it together. 3 pages. He watched an actor read it aloud from his bed. At the end, Raoul laughed so hard he cried. He died 2 days later. But he left a note, tell Evan that wasn't a rehearsal. That was the real thing. I kept that note too. Sometimes people ask if I'm still acting. I say yes. Just not always on a stage. Sometimes in hospital rooms. Sometimes in circle chairs. Sometimes in the sound booth of a late-night radio station, where I record monologues for people who can't sleep. Last month, a hospice nurse in Michigan sent a recording of a patient listening to my radio play. He was mouthing the words with me. The same lines. The same pauses. And then she added, he died before the ending. But he died with a story in his mouth. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I went for a long walk. All I could think was, that's what we all want, isn't it? Not just to be remembered, but to still be speaking. This story started with silence. With gaps between us. With things unsaid. Now, it lives in echoes. In a boy calling his father. In a man confessing to an empty chair. In the hush after the final line. We rehearsed our goodbye like a play. Same lines. Same pauses. Until one day, it wasn't rehearsal anymore. And I was ready. Because the truth had found its voice. And this time, I wasn't performing it for anyone else. Just for him. And for me. There's a photograph I keep on my desk. It's old. Faded. Edges curling like dried petals. My father's in it, maybe 35, standing beside a blackboard filled with symbols and half-erased questions. He's smiling. Not at the camera, but at something off-frame. I used to think he was smiling at a student. Now I like to think he was smiling at a future he didn't yet understand. At me. At the version of himself that might learn how to say, I love you, without needing to win the argument first. I opened a new workshop series last month. This one's different. It's called Scene Partners. 2 people write a shared goodbye. It can be literal, or metaphorical. A friend moving away. A parent slipping into dementia. A mentor stepping back. Every night ends the same. They perform the scene together. No audience. Just the 2 of them. Facing each other. Telling the truth. It's the hardest thing I've ever led. And the most necessary. We spend so much time preparing to leave, jobs, cities, relationships, but never each other. We wait too long to say what matters. And by the time we're ready, the other person is gone. Or silent. Or fading. But not here. Here, we speak before the silence wins. One night, after everyone left, I stayed behind. The chairs were still in a circle. The lights low. I sat in the center. And I spoke to the empty space across from me. Dad, I don't know if this counts as legacy. But I think you'd see the logic in it. I smiled. You used to say that the examined life was the only one worth living. I used to think that meant being cold. Distant. Analytical. I looked around the room. But I think it just means not letting the important words die in your throat. There was no answer, of course. Only warmth. Only memory. Sometimes I still perform. Sometimes I sit at a mic and record lines I wrote when I was 16. Lines he once called melodramatic. Lines he later asked me to say aloud. And every time, I close with the same phrase. It's not Shakespeare. It's not mine either. It's his. Do you believe in curtain calls? I pause. Let the silence stretch. Then I say, I do. Because some goodbyes deserve an echo. And I wait. Because somewhere, maybe in a theater, maybe in a hospice bed, maybe in the back of someone's mind where grief still lingers, someone hears it. Someone claps. And the story continues.